The NTSB is holding a public board meeting on January 27th for an update on the ongoing investigation regarding the mid-air collision that happened at the DC airport. What is included in the 800-plus page interview transcript of the controller working that flight. Hi, I'm Morgan. This is an aviation safety update. This video is regarding docket document number 74. It is 800 pages plus, but that is the only thing being analyzed in this video. I took the 895 page document and ran it through Notebook LM, and these are the slides that correlate with that. These will be available online on the Google site that I created, as well as an infographic, and I will post a link for that in the comments, but it is linked in my bio as well. So this is the local controller's perspective of the mid-air collision between PSA Flight 5342, which was a CRJ 700, and PAT 25, which was a Black Hawk helicopter. This happened on January 29th, 2025. The first slide details the background of the controller, and just looking at it, he had quite an extensive background. He was an experienced air traffic controller with a pilot's background. So 36 years old, started his FAA career in June 2016, so almost 10 years. Started in St. Petersburg, Florida, went to Wilmington, Delaware, and then started working at the DCA airport in Washington, D.C. His DCA experience, he arrived in October of 2022, qualified on local control in May of 2024. Here are the qualifications: a certified professional controller, CPC, and controller in charge, CIC. And his aviation background, this is what I meant by he had an extensive background, because not only was he a controller, he's also private pilot and instrument writing and a commercial pilot's license. The second slide provides an operational picture, and it was a heavier than normal night. So traffic volume was a 4 out of 5, and at about 80%. The quote was a little bit heavier than normal. Traffic complexity, a 3 to 4 out of 5, and 70%. So decreasing at the time of the incident. The weather was VFR, which is you can visually see what you're doing. So not heavy fog, heavy rain, that kind of thing. Clear skies, gusty winds favoring runway 33. The tower staffing deemed adequate, with an assistant local controller, ALC, on position, and the key operational status, local control and helicopter control positions were combined. This slide shows how two aircraft on separate missions enter local airspace. So this is the declared path of the Black Hawk helicopter, and this is the CRJ 700. So the Black Hawk helicopter checked in northwest of the airport. So the airport is here, and their request VFR, which is visually being able to fly and see everything around them, flight via helicopter route 1, which is right here, then route 4, which is right here, southbound towards Fort Washington, which is right here. And for the CRJ 700, checked in on the Mount Vernon visual approach for runway 1. So this is the Mount Vernon visual approach, and I would assume that this is runway 1 in this document, but there will be a more in-depth view of the airport and the runways in a second. So this slide shows how the controller made a proactive decision to create departure spacing. The controller asked the CRJ 700 if they were able to circle to land on runway 33. So this is runway 1 that we saw in the last slide, which I believe is what they were requesting. And the controller asked if they were able to circle back to land on runway 33, which is right here. They accepted the change, and the controller cleared flight 5342 to land, circle back and land on runway 33. The controller's stated rationale for this decision was, quote, "We had some departures waiting to depart runway 1. We really weren't getting enough spacing on final at the time." This slide details how the pilot of the Black Hawk helicopter accepted responsibility for visual separation between itself and other aircraft. So the controller to the Black Hawk issued traffic advisory on the CRJ. So they were letting them know that the CRJ, here's the CRJ, now circling for runway 33. So they were saying this, you need to be aware of this CRJ 700 that's circling in for runway 33. The Black Hawk helicopter responded that they had the CRJ in sight and request visual separation. Local controller approved that. As it showed on the previous slides, the controller asked the CRJ 700 to circle around and land on runway 33 to allow for some spacing with departures. And after clearing a departure on runway 1, the controller scan returned to the arriving traffic. The arriving traffic would be the Black Hawk helicopter and the CRJ 700, and something went wrong. So he visually identified an unsafe proximity between those two. The direct observation is right here. He saw a potential conflict again, and when looking outside the window and looking at the radar, the Black Hawk helicopter was closer than what they should have been. This slide details the final command that was issued as the conflict became imminent, and the controller stated they remember saying to them to maintain visual separation, pass behind that traffic, and then it happened. So he was saying this to the Black Hawk helicopter, and this testimony was corroborated by the assistant local controller, who recalls hearing someone say, "Oh shit," and then looking up to see the explosion. This slide details from the interview transcripts how the controller questioned if a traffic call to the CRJ 700 would have mattered. Stated that they were in the process of working their scan in and out and planned to advise the CRJ 700 of the helicopter traffic next after clearing that departure on runway 1. The controller's speculation, and this is the direct quote, the Pat helicopter, it's a very dark helicopter, especially at night along the river. I'm not sure if issuing a traffic call to the CRJ 700 would change the outcome. So this slide is about systemic insight and the complexity of the DCA helicopter routes. So procedural context, DCA has approximately 7 published helicopter routes in its immediate airspace. Helicopter Route 4 has a published altitude of 200 feet in the segment near the airport. Controller's observation perceived the Black Hawk helicopter as being closer to the runway than what normally would be. Noted that it was impossible to visually judge the helicopter's altitude at night. And here's a perspective. This is another systemic insight, and it details the frequency of conflict alerts at the DC airport. So this is from the controller. For us, the conflict alert system goes off on a regular basis. The controller did not recall hearing a conflict alert in this specific event, and the high frequency of alerts may contribute to nuance alerts and a potential alert desensitization within the operational environment. So that is, you hear it so often, and so you kind of get used to it and disregard it. Not saying that that happened, and this is not saying that that happened either, because he stated he did not recall hearing a conflict alert. A summary of some of the key factual points. He was experienced. The decision to use that runway was a proactive traffic management technique. Standard procedures were followed. The conflict was detected visually, not by an automated system, and the controller perceived the helicopter had deviated from its expected flight path. If you would like to submit comments or feedback on this video, you can do that at my Google site, which is linked in my bio and in the comments.